What's wrong?
Excuse me, I need the pages. The files are too many. I need to be reminded.
Oh, the
I just
page
removed them
references.
as I was going. The file number.
3733 is the page number. And the
It's file number 4. This is for what's the number?
I think, I'm advised it's volume 10.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
When you, did you enter this mortuary? Did you inspect the mortuary?
Yes, I did with Dr. Mudisani and Ms. Nechitsivani, and we also invited our mental health, the municipal health inspectors, the environmental health practitioner from the district.
In your, in the report, on page 3734, you say that the owner of the mortuary indicated that the bodies were received from Put You to Rest funeral parlor. Can you tell us more about that? What is the link between Put You to Rest and this mortuary? Because Put You to Rest funeral parlor, you also say, is all of the deceased, you say, from Precious Angels were sent to Put You to Rest. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct.
Did Put You to Rest funeral parlor have storage facilities for human remains?
No, they didn't.
But they received bodies from Precious Angels NGO.
Yes, they did.
So where would they keep the bodies if they didn't have storage facilities?
When we arrived at this mortuary, that was a former butchery, we asked the same question. In fact, when we arrived, the owner of Put You to Rest came, the lawyer of the owner of Put You to Rest came to the facilities, the one who demanded a search warrant. And we, then it triggered that we go to Put You to Rest because we wanted to understand how the Put You to Rest bodies ended up in this other facility. So we first checked the records in that facility and tried to match them against our list. And Ms. Pakiso went to Put You to Rest. So they also did not agree to them accessing their facility. We had to get a search warrant on Sunday, and the DG of the province arranged with the magistrate so that we could access the Put You to Rest facility. And also we then got to know about another one called
Royal Funeral Parlor. or something.
Royal Funeral Parlors. And we then got to know, in fact, the more we went to one facility, the more we got to know about others, and including the fact that Put You to Rest actually is originally a Limpopo funeral parlor. They didn't have facilities in Gauteng.
But this funeral parlor, this branch of Put You to Rest, this Gauteng Put You to Rest funeral parlor, didn't have storage facilities for bodies, but they would receive bodies.
Yes.
Did they explain then what they did? Because they didn't have storage. Why would they receive bodies if they couldn't store them?
It was precisely our concern as to how did they then get a license to render these services if they did not have a storage facility.
The regulations called Regulations Relating to Management of Human Remains requires in Regulation 10 that all facilities, and it's specific, it's not just mortuary premises, it refers to funeral undertakers and mortuary premises, and it requires that all facilities used in connection with the receiving, storage, preparation of human remains, for all those facilities on a funeral undertaker's premise, all of the facilities for the storage of the remains, for receiving remains, preparation of the human remains, shall be located on the said premises. And then Regulation 10 goes on to specify the minimum requirements for that kind of a facility relating to the size of the facility, the hygiene control measures, refrigeration facilities, generator facilities in the event that there's a power outage, and so on and so on. Were those, was anything like that present at Put You to Rest?
No, actually it was precisely our concern. We also wanted to understand under what circumstances were they issued with a license. But it also triggered another investigation on our part, which we said we'll raise with our mental health users on the transfer of human remains. Like, for instance, where we were at this facility, the owner said she only dealt with foreign bodies. And we wanted to understand how she did that, because we had very strict requirements that she had to comply with. I'm just saying, every time we identify a place, we went to a place, there were more questions that we asked, and there were more issues that came up, for which we thought there would be perhaps further investigation.
Did Put You to Rest have a license to operate as a funeral undertaker?
Well, Ms. Pakiso wrote that, yes, they did have a license.
But are you saying that despite the fact that they had a license, they were not in compliance with the regulations?
Yes, they were not in compliance, because we still ask the question, how could they be a Limpopo-based undertaker but rendering services whereby the remains were handled by other storage facilities that were not theirs?
Are they being investigated?
Yes, we raised this with our colleagues, because it was a much broader question that we were asking. Like I said, every time we went to a facility, we had more questions to ask, like this one of foreign bodies. It was not part of the life Esidimeni, something that we got into by chance. So every step of the way, we identified that there were things that may not have been within the provisions of the Act, various acts that governed how mortal remains should be handled.
And I understand from the report that Put You to Rest would send bodies to the mortuary, the converted butchery. That's where they would send the human remains.
Yes, but that was not the only mortuary where they sent the human remains. This is why we wanted the full list from them of all the life Esidimeni deceased bodies that they may have handled, so that we could go to each and every facilities where they sent them and check the records there, because we wanted to verify every single step so that we had proper records and reconcile them back to the original database of life Esidimeni. the 1,712 that I referred to in my initial report when I presented.
But human remains, the butchery, sounds ominous. You mean to the refrigeration within a butchery?
The mortuary, as I understand, had been a butchery in its previous life. It was converted into a mortuary.
Yes, it was previously a butchery. That's why the family member, like I recounted, the family member said when she was given that address, her recollection, because she was familiar, she grew up in the area. She didn't know of any mortuary in the area. She knew of a butchery. That's why immediately I went myself to check whether was it a mortuary or not.
Yes,
So it had
but we're
been,
talking about a former butchery which has refrigeration facilities,
which had become a mortuary.
which had become a mortuary. Because human remains and butcheries conjure deep fear.
Yes.
Very well.
In fact, Justice Moseneke, it's partly why I use that language about it. It's because there was deep fear amongst some of the family members when they were informed that this is the way, this was where their loved ones were being stored. And the manner in which they were, the problem doesn't, the tragedy doesn't end with the death of these individuals. It continues in the manner in which the bodies of their loved ones were handled and the respect and the dignity that was absent in the manner in which their loved ones were handled after death. And so it's for that reason that I'm specifically asking about this. There are two issues. One is the unlawfulness of the facilities, and the second is the way in which the deceased were treated, the way in which the human remains were handled, and the time frames, the delays that took place in a context where, in a society like ours, which is steeped in culture, there are particular requirements for the way in which we handle our deceased family members.
Yes. Let's hear the witness. Let's hear her response to that.
Yes, I agree. In fact, this was the revelation. And it, like I said, it helped to hear the family members relate that during the healing process, because that on its own revealed quite a lot for us. Hence, our investigation, just going to that facility, exposed the activities of put you to rest. It also exposed the fact that there were a few other facilities that were serving as storage areas and undertakers. It helped us to do a further investigation. But what we also identified is that this seemed to be more prevalent in the Tshwane district area. Ms. Nechitsivani and Dr. Mudisane, when they went to other facilities, there seemed to be normal processes, because we started going to Johannesburg, Esidimeni, and just going to Esidimeni and Johannesburg, it was quite clear that for those areas, the practices were within normal provisions of the law. Problem seems to be residing mainly in the Tshwane district area.
That gives me deep concern, as you know. I was born and raised and lived in Atteridgeville. So I hear the statement, but it's a matter of very deep concern. You may proceed, ma'am.
Yes,
That's my home village.
I apologize, Justice.
Yes. Please do proceed.
Yes. So we then had one testimony of, I obviously will not remember the name. It was an elderly person who said that she had to move from place to place looking for her relative. She had to use her pension money, and the outcome was that she was told the body was in Limpopo. It is the basis on which my team had to go and see whether there were more of the life Esidimeni deceased. Because this is where put you to rest for actual mortuaries were, not in Tswane. So we didn't know whether they had stored other bodies in Limpopo. That's why Ms. Esidimeni had to go to Limpopo just to check the records and just verify that none of the life Esidimeni deceased were in Limpopo.
But in put to rest facility, you did indeed find bodies related to patients who were at Esidimeni.
In Limpopo.
I'm just trying to ascertain as a matter of fact. No, in Atteridgeville, did you find bodies of patients who were formerly cared for at Esidimeni?
There were records. There were records, and where in one facility they had Papa's funeral, so we asked for records so that we could verify and identify the families, ensure that we could trace the families and have proper records. So what you see here is the work that we did from the day that there was a family healing process. And we followed up on every case that we could.
But DG, you actually found, you did find bodies which are related to Esidimeni at this put to rest place?
Put you to rest in Tswane
Yes.
did not have a facility. It was, they had offices. It was a funeral parlor without storage facilities. They, I would say, maybe outsourced, if, for lack of a better word.
I'm just trying to put my finger on what you ultimately found in Atteridgeville by way of deceased bodies.
Yes, Ms. Esidimeni, in her account with Dr. Mudisani, they did identify, like I say, in some of the facilities, we had to match the records of the list that we had from Life Esidimeni against the records of the storage place, that these were indeed from Life Esidimeni. So that was the exercise we involved in. So, Ms. Esidimeni, this report is following that process, just to verify, because we had to make sure that that was indeed the Life Esidimeni. Whether there were already bodies, some bodies members of the family had already taken and buried, and others, we had to check the records and verify that even if it was Papa's funeral, we just wanted to make sure that they were not from Life Esidimeni.
And you found that there were?
Some of them.
And you say the significant number came from the Precious Angels NGO.
Yes.
Did you meet with the owner of Precious Angels?
We met the mother of the owner of Precious Angels, because firstly we could not go to the two facilities, and the mother could not allow us. We were not able to. She was not available. We met her mother.
So I think the owner's name is Ethel Ngube.
Yes.
But you haven't met with her. You're saying you didn't meet with her, you met with her mother.
Yes, we met that person who introduced herself as the mother to the owner of Precious Angels.
I understand. This investigation and report, I understand, is, I mean, this is a complete and final report, but I understand that you are continuing with the process of tracing particularly those who were buried as paupers. Am I correct?
This is the report that the National Department of Health produced. Remember, we're working as a team. between the National Department of Health and the provincial team led by Dr. Mudisani. So Dr. Mudisani continues to do his work. Like he went to the Johannesburg mortuaries to check if there were any cases, meaning and any other. At some stage, they also had to go to AFBOF and identify if there were any life Esidimeni. I'm just saying it's work that we did as a team, but I had to say as National Department of Health, it's actually not in our competence to be doing this work. This is how far we've gone and this is the report. But the provincial team will obviously have to continue if needed.
And I understand. So it's a continuing investigation and there will be an update to all of this information. As you've already provided in relation to the recommendations, will you be making available updates, further updates to the implementation of the recommendations, including in relation to the issue of the funeral parlors and the tracing of unknown deceased?
If you look at how the recommendations of the Ombud are styled, there are recommendations that are very specific to National Department of Health and the national ministers. There are others that are specifically for the Gauteng Department of Health. And I think when Dr. Kinosi comes, he will give an account, but he will also give the numbers and indicate how further they can go. I'm raising that because if you look at some of the things we have to do, we are providing support, we are providing assistance, but we can only work this far because we also still have to support other provinces in terms of mental health services.
I understand. DG, that brings me to the end of my questions. I see from the report that your response to this was immediate. You went to Attridgeville, you went to Salisville in Attridgeville and stayed there till 11 o'clock at night and then returned first thing the next morning. And your response has really been exemplary. And I want to thank you for the way in which you've been handling the aftermath of this tragedy.
Thank you.
Before we move away, when one looks at the report, which I must say I had not read up to now, who awarded these contracts? Was the municipality or was it the National Department of Health
Is the municipality.
to do proper funerals?
Is the municipality.
Municipality. And who would have asked the municipality, do you know?
Well, we did not get into those details. What we did when we went to this facility in Attridgeville, we invited the environmental health officer that was responsible for that district to join us.
Now, see the list on 3738 of people buried as paupers. Have their families ever been brought into the picture again?
Yes.
Informed that these remains of the people have been buried as paupers? And where, and so on. I see it's a number of varied funeral undertakers who did this. Do families know about this?
Yes, this is the process that we started. This is why I was saying justice. When we went to one facility and when we went to another, we discovered these. And we were using this as a basis of saying, let's identify and check against life Esidimeni. If there were life Esidimeni, we then go back, at least firstly verify the identity, go back, contact the family so that we can make sure that there's a proper burial.
So we can accept that the family of Miss Sarafina Ngobo, who was buried at Lotus by Royal Funeral Undertakers, are aware of these details.
Yes, this is why we wanted to verify that, firstly, get details about them, and then as part of this, hence our engagement with the family committee and our engagement in this group was mainly to do that. If you recall, Justice, in the family committee, we have people who deal with those who have passed on, but also who deal with survivors. So in that group, we're trying to make sure that within the committee, they could help us also trace some of the.
What is the difference between table 10 and table 11? Table 10 specifically referred to, that is page 3738, refers to being buried as paupers. And the other one, post-mortem and burial status of life Esidimeni deceased, but there's only 7 names. So I'm trying to understand the difference between the two tables.
We had the life Esidimeni deceased who were buried by their family members. And we also had others that the undertakers just went ahead and buried them as paupers. So Ms. Nechitsevanis and Dr. Mudisan were differentiating between the two, so that for those who were buried by the families, we didn't have to do any follow-up. But those that were paupers, we had to go back and identify their family members.
For instance, here I see now this deals mainly with post-mortems and burial status, but I see post-mortems have been done in all instances. And those who are still at the mortuary, have they since been handed over to their families?
I will have to establish that, and maybe Dr. Kinosi can give an update on that.
Or can you give an update on
Yes.
that? Okay, very well. And I'm sorry, I misread that. The table is much longer than I thought. Sorry. So Dr. Kinosi should be able to deal with these annexures and the possible update by now.
Precisely, because there's
Okay.
been ongoing work.
Okay, thanks. Councillor?
There are no further questions from me, Justice Masaneke. Thank you, DG.
Are there any questions on the legal aid, South Africa?
There are few, but not.
Mr. Skibi? Mhm.
There are few, but not so many, Justice.
Yes, and you don't have to apologize, huh? We're here to find the truth.
Yes.
I'm like a referee, but I don't play the game. I just make sure that you played within the reasonable time and effectively.
Good afternoon, Matsuso.
Afternoon.
Yes, I am from the Legal Aid South Africa, representing the mental health care users from Life Esidimeni and their families who survived the Gauteng mental marathon health project, which brought us to this hearing today from the recommendations of the health health ombud. We can also, from our part, that we appreciate your apology and on behalf of our clients, and that although the families of the survivors, they still have some answers, questions, like my colleagues here and the chair of these proceedings. Today we are in the 4th day, but we're still digging deep to get the facts as to what actually happened in this. I'm not gonna be, I'll take you from just few questions, not that many. From the scope of the recommendations by the health ombud, did you, in your action plan, only focus on those 18 points which were raised from the recommendations of the health ombud? Or did you go further and investigate if there were other people or more people who might have did some wrongdoings in this during this project?
Well, the way the recommendations are provided for, there are some that are specific for the Gauteng Provincial Department of Health, to which Dr. Kinosi will respond to. We actually focus mainly on those that were for the National Department of Health, but we also worked in partnership with those that were for the Provincial Health Department. Others, the Office of the Premier took leadership in. And I think when DG Baleni comes, she will respond to what is it they did at provincial level to address some of the issues.
Yes. We know, for instance, although perhaps maybe it may not be your terrain, it's common cause the former MEC resigned. The other 2 officials, including the HOD, have been suspended. Was there any other official apart from those to whom some action was taken?
That will be responded to by Dr. Kinosi.
All right, thank you. I didn't get your qualifications. I may sometimes call you Miss or Mrs., whereas maybe I may be demoting you. Are you a medical doctor or?
Well, my first degree is pharmacy, and then I did a postgraduate management program at UCT, and I have a master's in law, but I'm not a lawyer.
Yes, thank you.
You disavow lawyering too emphatically, DG. That's all I've been, a lawyer all my life. So I'm worried about your attitude.
No, it's not my attitude. I only studied health law, so it's a very confined area in law, so it's not, so I can't
As
make
it's a master's in health law.
in health law and ethics, so it's very confined.
I see.
Yes.
I follow. There are some good lawyers, believe you me.
Thank you. So you are a qualified medical doctor?
No,
I
I did a pharmacy
You
degree.
did pharmacy degree?
Yes.
Thank you. You know that generally medicines are divided into different categories or different levels of health care centers. That is district, regional, and tertiary, where tertiary hospital. Am I correct?
Yes, to be more precise, we've got primary health care, and even within the primary health care level, you've got different types of facilities. And then if we're talking strictly about hospitals, not level of care, we have a district hospital, we've got a regional hospital, we've got a specialized hospitals, which we call health establishment, and we've got tertiary. We also have central health hospitals.
And in addition to that, in those categories that you've just mentioned, the department further divided medicines from the so-called medicine formulary in terms of different levels of those hospitals with regards to the medication where a patient may obtain medication. Am I correct?
Well, if you are referring to the essential medicines list, it is only in two levels. You've got primary health care and you've got hospital level. Hospital can be used at various hospitals, but even within that, you've categorized them into adult and pediatric, because we deal with medicines for adults in a particular way and for children differently. So you have to have a prescribed way in the manner in which you've listed them in the essential medicines list.
For a patient who has been discharged from the mental health care facility, has been discharged to go home, can he or she obtain medication at the primary health care level?
Yes, it's not only confined to a mental health facility. If they have a prescription, they can. There are what we call repeats. If you have a repeat and you have been down referred, you can collect your medicine at a lower level facility.
But medication at lower level facilities are there, if I put it this way, at the lower level, do they have medication which they can obtain from at the
You can
more
have in a,
intense or-
you can have in a community health center, for instance, which is at primary health care. You can have in a primary health care level. Remember that the sizes of different primary health care facilities differ. You've got small, medium, large, and some of the large ones can be, to the same size of a community health center.
Yes.
So it is always important that in the manner in which people access medicines, it has to be closer to where they live. So if they've been discharged and they have to just collect their medicines, they don't have to be assessed, it can still be at facilities closer to where they live. In fact, we've gone even beyond just confining people to accessing their medicines. When they have repeats, we've got a program called Chronic Care Medical Program, where people can actually go and just collect their medicines. It doesn't necessarily have to be in our facilities. This is at peripheral points where it's closer to where they live.
So patients who were discharged during this marathon project, where they were receiving medical treatment, is it possible that some did not get any medication after they were discharged?
Well, it's possible. If you look at how this project was executed, it's possible that they may.
Right.
Why would that be so? Why is it a possibility?
Well, from what we heard about the recount, I mean, an NGO does not store medication. And the manner in which community-based mental health care, like I said, Professor Mel Freeman will explain that. the manner in which it's designed, people must still have access to primary health care facilities, they must still have access to outpatient care, and there must still be psychosocial support, they must still be seen by social workers if needed. There must still be assistance programs, meaning community-based mental health care is actually not even just about medication. It's also about integration back into community services. They must still be able to be assisted so that they get back into normal life, they are able to work. So access to medicine is just but one aspect. And even that, like I said, the way the project was executed, if an NGO did not even understand that when people were transferred from Life Esidimeni, they had to be transferred with a clinical file. And a clinical file would have included a record of what type of medication you are on. So that on its own tells you that it wasn't properly executed.
Which means many patients probably went to the district service point and they had no bed letter, they had no clinical records, and nobody knew what to give them.
Precisely.
And how would such a situation be remedied? How would they possibly manage to get clinical records?
If you look at how we executed this in terms of the recommendation of the Ombud, the very first thing you do is to send your clinical team. And clinical team is not just your medical doctor. You need your psychiatrist, you need your psychologist, you need your occupational therapist, so that as you prepare a record, it's a comprehensive record. And that's the basis on which you can then have a record compiled, even as you transfer. The receiving team, clinical team, have a complete record from the transferring one.
And you know that was done in relation to the survivors of the Esidimeni tragedy.
When they were transferred from the record of the Ombud and the recommendations, it's clear that there were no clinical records. But we started that process from scratch. We sent clinical teams. They assessed every single one. In fact, we started preparing a file from the beginning, from scratch, for every single one of them.
Thank you, Deputy. Chair. In your, from the Health Ombuds report, there's a report that the transportation of these patients, some were used, open vans were used to transport them. Are you aware about that?
Yes, I not only read it in the Ombuds report, I personally also read the report of the Office of Health Standard Compliance Inspectors.
Who is that?
The Office of Health Compliance Inspectors, they also had a report because they conducted the inspections on behalf of the Ombud. So I went back again to read the report. So in terms of that report, the transportation was not only inappropriate, it was unsuitable.
Yes. So that was improper for them to use such type of a transport?
It's not even a vehicle. It's when you transport mental health users, they must be accompanied. So this is how we executed this project as part of implementation of the recommendation of the Ombud. They must be accompanied by professionals when you move them from one facility to the other. Their records, their clinical records must be handed over, and there must be in that handover, the two teams must meet and discuss. And what was also missing is that you must also have family members. The family members must also be contacted so that when they arrive at the facility, when they are relocated, their family members also know where they are going to be housed and where they are going to be accommodated. So we did it in that way. And where we could not get a family member specifically, the family committees stood in, we could ask them to at least verify that they were happy or comfortable with the facility that was chosen.
After the said news were broken, you personally, you were also involved in looking at these facilities, looking for other remaining patients.
Yes, I did where I could, but I also relied on some of the team members, both from the province and from the department. But we also made use of clinical experts and other experts that we could access.
Have the NGO called Takalani, did you get there? Takalani.
Yes, from the report of the Ombud, yes.
So you were also, or your team members, they went
My
to
team
that
members went. I never got to get to Takalani.
Because so far we've got 7 family members of the patients who survived through this. There could be more. We're still going to look for some more. Those 6 family relatives is Andrew Peterson, Lesego Baloi.
Excuse me, I can't hear.
Those 7, I'm sorry for that. Yeah, I'll raise my voice. Those 7 family relatives that we have so far is Andrew Peterson, Lesego Baloi, Refense, Chilwane, Nomsa Khadebe, Nomalo Nkosi, Sibusiso Skakane, Noguthula Ntswane, Modinyane Maditi, and Agnes Molocho.
Are these names of mental health users or of their families?
Of their families.
Those are names of family members.
That's correct, yes.
Very well. The question should now follow.
And from one of, just gonna quote our instructions from one family relatives, Lesego Baloi, whom her sister, she only heard from her friend that she was transferred to Takalani. She described the conditions upon which the mental ill patient, the condition that he was in. The mental ill patient is Julia Hate. According to her, she found her clothes torn. She was on barefoot, and it was very cold in May and a rainy day in May 2016. So that condition is clearly cannot be condoned and is unacceptable. You agree with that?
I not only agree, I went to a worse facility than that, and which was just as disturbing when we went to prepare for the relocation. And one of that was a former horse stable.
Which one was that?
In Centurion.
Do you know the name?
I think
Oh, you can't remember. It's fine.
Yes.
It's fine. All right. In your testimony, and I'll just move to the second last point, perhaps. In your testimony, you testify that yesterday, the two officials who were where disciplinary action were taken, they are yet to be reported to their professional bodies.
Yes,
But
I
still
can
away,
confirm that.
are they, what is holding that to be reported to
Because if we report them, the professional bodies is going to say they are waiting for the outcome of the disciplinary action. So this is what Dr. Kenosi will elaborate on, because the reporting was done by the acting HOD and the current MEC. And one of the things that they will report on is that they were awaiting the disciplinary hearing. In his explanation, he said that normally when they've reported, and especially when people are subject to disciplinary hearing, the Health Professions Council or the Nursing Council always says, can we also get records so that we don't duplicate the investigations? So this was how he had explained this.
Any criminal charges were reported or opened, or is there nothing?
DG Baleni will talk to that, as well as the HOD, acting HOD, Dr. Kenosi.
The person who was in charge of this project, there was no steps taken against him.
Which
Or
person?
was not investigated.
Which person?
Um,
If you look at the copy of the record, because I got to see a list of all the officials who were involved. I mean, it's a long list. So if you say a person, unless you call him by name, because
You're referring to the project leader, Mr. Mosenogi.
That's correct, Chair, yes.
Okay.
Is that the person?
That is.
Very well.
or Mr. Msenoch, I think Dr. Kenosi will respond to that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. There is no further.
Okay. Are you done, Council? Very well. We're going to move on now to Advocate Groenewald.
Thank you very much, Justice. Director General, my name is Dirk Groenewald and I represent 3 of the family members who lost a loved one at Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Centre. Now, from my side, I would also just like to thank you for coming and testifying at these proceedings and providing us with some clarity on what happened, how it happened, and why it happened. I would like to start off, you testified in respect of a question by Justice Moseneke as to whether or not the department has built any new facilities for mental health users. You referred to a facility that was built in the Northern Cape and which was, I think your words were, it was a total hazard or didn't work out, and then you said you decided that you're not going to build any more facilities, that you're going to focus more on community-based healthcare. Is that correct?
No, I didn't say we're not building. We said the policy environment, both international and the WHO guidelines, is that the recommendation is that we must move towards community-based mental health care, particularly for those people who need long-term care.
Sorry, I've just got to interrupt you. I didn't hear the policy guidelines. What describes that we must move to community-based?
Is the mental health policy and strategic framework 2013 to 2020.
2013 to 2020.
2020, yes. We identified different areas and the kind of, remember, mental health care is a continuum of care. People don't stay in long-term facilities forever, so they need to be reintegrated. If they are better, they need to be reintegrated back. They get assessed. If they relapse, and they need to be kept in long-term facilities. So we need to make sure that it's a continuum of care.
Okay. So it's the mental health policy of 2013 to 2020.
Policy and strategic,
policy-
policy framework and strategic plan of
Policy,
2013 to 2020.
And strategy.
Yes.
Now, to who does this policy apply?
It applies to the whole country.
Whole country, national and provincial.
Mainly, its implementation happens at provincial level.
So mainly it happens at provincial level.
Yes.
All right. You would agree with me that this policy, or let me rephrase my question. You'll agree with me that the Gauteng Marathon project, it's based on that policy.
Well, I can't say that is based on that policy because we did not even know that they were engaged in that project. If it was, then it should have followed the procedure that we have set in place on how a project like that gets implemented.
You would agree with me that the MEC's purpose and the Gauteng Department of Health's purpose, they call it the deinstitutionalization. It has the same purpose and object of a community-based healthcare system.
Well, the first issue we got to understand when we wanted to understand why they embarked on a project, we were told that they wanted to reduce costs. They wanted to cut down on costs. So we don't know whether that was the aim to implement the strategic, the mental health framework, policy framework, or whether it was to reduce costs. Until we've had an opportunity to study that and mesh that against the policy, we'll be able to ascertain that. Because on one hand, we're informed that they were trying to reduce costs.
Well, we now know that they haven't reduced costs, and we haven't received the figure as of yet as what this whole tragedy in fact cost the department and the taxpayer, but I trust we will get to that. But the point I would just like to make, ma'am, is that I find it very difficult to believe that the Premier and the HOD and somebody else, we don't know who, sat around the table and they just came up with this policy. They were informed by this mental health policy framework and strategy.
Well,
That was the basis they used for this program.
I actually disagree. I'll tell you why. This is a project that Smith, it was called Smith-Michel. During the apartheid days, there was something called Smith-Michel, where they kept these people, and black people were actually abused. And what happened in 1994 with the new constitution, particularly in 1996 after the constitution was adopted, the provinces assume the competence of looking after mental health care users. Now, a number of provinces actually had a relationship with Life Esidimeni. Some of the provinces ended their contracts, and they did not end up with this disaster. They ended the contracts. Now, if you end a contract, Eastern Cape still has a relationship with Life Esidimeni, both the health and the social development sector. Limpopo does have a contract like this.
So, sorry, if you say a contract like this,
With Life Esidimeni.
are you
Life
sa-
Esidimeni mental health in Eastern Cape, they do have. Now, for the provinces that ended their contract, they did not end up with this disaster. So it cannot have been as a result of the policy framework.
Yeah, but, so there's other provinces that also terminated their contracts with Life Esidimeni and that embarked on another program or process, similar to this one, but which did not end it in the same tragedy.
Not in this way, no.
Not in this way.
No.
But it's based on the same principle, the
Well,
program there in the other provinces.
yes, some of them refurbished their own facilities and then reintegrated the mental health users in their facilities. So this is why I say the Gauteng one, justice was unique. And the Gauteng one, we still want to understand why.
Yeah, you're really saying the national mental health framework need not lead to this catastrophe.
Precisely.
And if the protections and the safeguards in it are followed, it need not lead to death. I mean, that's really your answer, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Council,
Thank you
may
very
proceed.
much. Thank you very much, Justice. My apologies. I'm just trying to get my head around this whole project and how it was, what's the bigger picture behind it. Because you now say that there's other provinces that implemented the same project, but it didn't lead to the chaos and the tragedy as happened in Gauteng. And you said that we must, the recommendation by the Ombudsman is that we must actually get somebody in to assist us. And you say that we have the World Health Organization to come and assist us because this is a difficult project. But is the project then already running in South Africa?
Can I differentiate between policy and project? Can you clarify whether you're asking about the project or about the policy?
I'm asking about the project because you just testified, Director General, that in other provinces, this project is already running.
Can I correct that?
Please,
In
please.
other provinces, I'm explaining that they had a contract with Life Esidimeni, the same way as Gauteng did. They ended the contracts with Life Esidimeni. It did not end up in this disaster. So I'm saying when we're informed and when I was contacted by Section 27, they said Gauteng Provincial Health Department was ending a contract with Life Esidimeni. So I'm trying to say that you have provinces that had similar contracts. When they ended the contracts, we did not end up with this disaster.
No, well, I don't have facts that don't agree with your statement. What I want to know is, you testified that they followed a similar project from cancelling the project with Life Esidimeni and going on their own. They followed the same project as was followed in Gauteng, but the consequences weren't the same.
No.
Is the policies, let me rephrase that. So the way the other provinces implemented it, their policy was different. Their policy and their project was different totally from this one in Gauteng.
Okay, I'm going to differentiate a project, a policy, and a contract. It's three things, okay? You had a contract between Provincial Health Department, whether Eastern Cape, Gauteng, and so on, with Life Esidimeni, okay? Gauteng says they are going to end the contract with Life Esidimeni. Now, we don't get to know what the purpose or the reason is. That is the first thing. So all what we requested is to say this contract cannot end. We're not told what the purpose is. When I intervened, it was to say what is it that is needed? That is the first thing. The second, with regard to the other provinces, they also had a contract with Life Esidimeni. They ended their contracts. I never got to be told, but nobody ended up in a situation where we are. The policy framework was a consultative process. This is how we develop policy in government. It started with an indaba, or I would say a summit, because you don't develop policy.
Indaba is an English word.
Is it the same?
It is in the Oxford English Dictionary.
Yes.
Trust me.
Thank you.
Very well.
Summit. And in the summit, we invited mental health experts. We invited different government departments to say what should be the policy on mental health in this country. And it's the outcome of that consultation, independent of what the contractual arrangements were. And if I may, if you allow me, at the height of Life Esidimeni, you might have been aware that there was a headline that the MEC of Social Development in Eastern Cape wanted to end the contract and do exactly what happened. And we asked our colleagues to say, but you can't do what Gauteng did. You just experienced this. So as I speak, Eastern Cape still has their contract in place. I'm trying to say somebody will have to persuade me that this was an intention to implement policy, because if it was, it can't have been, because we've got a very clear procedure on how it's done. And may I hasten to say, we have held workshops in every province explaining precisely what this entails. But even before that, you do an assessment of mental health services in each province. Before they embark on that, you prepare ground. Any NGO or anybody who would like to render this service, they should have been trained. They must be resourced. So you don't wake up one day and say you are implementing a policy. It's a runners. It's inappropriate, and I think it undermines the policy.
Well, Council, you've had a long explanation.
Thank you very much, Justice.
In fact, it is a 101 of sorts.
Indeed, sir.
But you go ahead with the questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, DG, for that explanation. To say that somebody needs to persuade you that this was an attempt to implement that policy. Have you made that request to the MEC? Have you asked her, well, was this now a flawed attempt of implementing the policy?
Well, I would even go further. The Mental Health Act amendment of 2002 makes provisions for community-based mental health care. Now, in 2002, that policy was not even in place. This policy was just adopted quite recently, but the Mental Health Act and its provisions date back to 2002, and it makes provision for community-based mental health services.
In principle, Council, I'm going to have questions around whether or not it is appropriate in an ideal implementative setting to have community-based health care. Are you contesting the wisdom of such a health care plan?
Well, Justice,
And then you could put it
perhaps-
to the witness so that she can defend it
Yeah.
or otherwise.
100%. Justice, no, that's not my purpose with my questioning. Perhaps from our following questioning, we will
It
we will
become
get
clearer.
we will
Very
get to
well.
that.
Very well.
Director General, you confirmed that at the end of, by October 2015, you were already informed of concerns by some NGOs as to the consequences of the implementation of this project. If I talk about the project, I talk about the Gauteng Marathon project. In 2015, you were approached, you testified you were approached by Section 2017.
To be more precise, Section 27 called to me was to say, can you intervene as Gauteng not to end the contract
Yes.
with Life Esidimeni? So this is why I differentiate between policy, contract, and project, because at the time I didn't even know of the project.
Well, would you say that's quite a piecemeal approach of dealing with the problem? Because you cannot look just at the cancellation of the contract, you must also look at the consequences thereof and the policy they want to implement. You know, you cannot have a piecemeal approach. But my question is simply, you knew in October of 2015, you knew that the contract with Life Esidimeni was going to be cancelled. Yes, so you can just answer yes because you've testified that already.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, this is what Gauteng was planning to do, to end the contract.
And then you instructed Professor Freeman to intervene, to be your watchdog, if I can put it like that, from the National Department side, to say, just have a look there, what's going on there with the Gauteng Department of Health, and just see to it that, you know, whatever they're doing, they must just be sure that it's in line with policy or law, whatever. Is that correct?
It's incorrect.
Incorrect. So you didn't instruct him to go and overview of,
I said he
Oversee
must
them.
go firstly get information,
okay?
because the only information we had, not from Gauteng, but from Section 27, was that a contract was ending. We didn't have any further information. We didn't even know that it was about the plan. We didn't have any information. So I can't have instructed Professor Freeman to go and facilitate something. He was supposed to go and get that information and work with them. The very first thing I requested was that could they at least invite him to a meeting where they could brief him, and that did not happen.
Now that did not happen. And what did you do about that, Director General?
So I spoke to the HOD, as I said, because the first issue was about the agreement that had to be reached. Like I said, they went to court, and in December, there was a settlement. And once the settlement was signed and the matter was agreed to, I did not even see that it was still, if a matter is before the courts and there's an agreement, I wasn't sure whether I still had to intervene further.
So you decided, but you were informed late or in the beginning of 2016 that they were going ahead with the plan and with the project. Apologies. Your testimony was that Dr. Esidimeni informed you that they were proceeding to implement the plan.
No, he informed me that there was an agreement that had to be signed, and I had to intervene because he didn't want this to be a court order. And that was in December, not beginning of 2016. It was in December of 2015.
So he didn't inform, you weren't informed that they were going ahead with the project.
No, he was telling me that they had to, remember, in December, the spirit of the agreement was that they had to involve different partners in the development of the plan, and that plan had to be concluded by end of January. Now, you can't start discussing implementation when there's no plan. So I did not have information that there was a plan then in December, but an agreement that was reached in court, which could not be made a court order. And that was his request.
So you had no further follow-ups because you didn't think it was needed.
I did not have any further follow-ups because January of 2016, I was the chair of the executive board of the World Health Organization, so I was not in the country at the time.
Thank you, DG. If we could then just go to the situation of Ms. Mashlangu, the MEC. You have now presented to us, the status of the recommendations made by the Ombud. Now, I just have a few questions there. If you feel that you cannot answer the questions because you do not know, then you can just say you don't know and just inform us who is the relevant person that can testify and explain it to us. You agree that Ms. Mashlangu, she voluntarily resigned a day before the Ombudsman's report was made public?
Yes, it was published in the news, and I also referred to it in the report.
Ma'am, I would just like to get your opinion, and the families that I represent would just like to get your view, and I think perhaps the public as well. Do you feel, or do you think that the voluntary resignation of an individual that is implicated in the deaths of 118 people, do you think that is sufficient accountability and responsibility?
Well, it would be very difficult for me to respond, but I guess that there are laws in this country, and there are processes, and this process of arbitration is meant to help us deal with some of these issues.
But in respect of Ms. Mashlangu, and especially to ensure that there's accountability from her side, do you feel that her resignation is sufficient?
Well,
Was sufficient?
I take it that individually, if you're a health professional, you get sown. There's a code of ethics that apply. You get sown. There's a code of conduct. There are ethics and so on. And I guess even people who are political office bearers who are appointed in particular positions, they also are sown to serve the Republic in various ways. And I would imagine that it requires of us to conduct ourselves in a particular way, so I cannot make a judgment. I think that there are processes to determine that. And in this respect, this process should help us deal with that particular matter.
But it's quite a fair question, though, DG. Council says to you, in a tragedy of this magnitude, in your view, is mere resignation a day or two before a devastating report about a public official is released sufficient to atone
Well,
for
maybe
the wrongdoing that led to the death? I think that is the question.
okay,
And I
maybe,
think you should confront it.
okay, maybe to be more direct, I would have thought that a particular individual would have been here also, would have been called to at least come and present and give answers, because some of the answers could not have been given by Musenegi as a junior official. Some of the questions I can't answer myself because that project was executed wrongfully. So it is for that reason that I thought this process would assist us with that.
Okay, let's rephrase it.
The second,
I'm sorry, the second. I'm
the
sorry I
second,
interrupted you.
yes.
You go ahead and
Yes,
finish your answer.
the second is that, yes, if we are accountable, we should be subjected to the to the full force of the law in this country. If she has to account, she has to, and I think a sign of accountability is also about an individual. If you think you've erred, you have to account, and in my opinion, I think she should firstly be part of this process. Secondly, she should also be subjected to other legal processes.
Yeah, that's a fair answer. But it had to be confronted because it's, if I was one of the families, I'll start feeling like part of family because I've been sitting with the families for so long. I would want to know, after 118 deaths, and there appears, I'm not saying conclusively yet, and there appears to be recklessness and gross negligence. Is resignation alone enough? I think it's a fair question to ask. And I think many South Africans do ask the question. Do you just sign the letter and you go and that's it? Or is there more? And I think you as National Director, you are being invited to express your views. Not in a definitive way, but in a way that acknowledges the role and room for accountability by those who hold public power or who exercise public power.
There are probably two levels. Administratively, within my power as an accounting officer, senior administrative person, senior technical officer, I would follow the full might of the law. At a political level, which is slightly beyond me, I think this is why I was saying that even if you've resigned, as an executive authority, you are not subject to provisions of the Public Service Act or any other because you've resigned. You can't go to Parliament, I guess, to account. So the first that I responded to was that this process in itself should be one such process that helps with that accountability. The second is that there are legal processes in this country that must also be followed.
For instance, people would say, you National Director, and what's happening at the front of the police and the MPA? What are they? Because we know recommendations of the Ombudsman went that far. Is there somebody who's going to tell us where are they, how far are they, what have they done around this matter? It's a common question that it comes to mind to me, just as a citizen, not even as an arbitrator. So it's fair for counsel to ask you, is there going to be, where's the NPA, the National Prosecuting Authority, where's the South African Police Services? Are they making progress? How far are they? And what are we to expect? You might or you might not know, but it's a fair question to be put to you.
The DG of the Office of the Premier, DG Baleni, is coming to deal with that particular issue. I should say exactly where we are. But as I said, the SIU has already started its investigations.
Okay.
Hence I said legal processes will follow.
Will follow.
Yes.
Counsel, it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Justice. Director General, we are now 8 months. It's now 8 months since the Ombudsman has made his report known and presented his reports. Some of these family members, it's been now a year, more than a year, since they have lost their loved ones. At the end of the day, you agree with me. We are here at the arbitration proceedings, and we are thankful for these proceedings. But at the end of the day, no individual has been held accountable. You agree with me?
I agree.
Yes. And you agree with me that failure, that's a hindrance, that's an obstacle for these family members to get closure. You agree with me?
I agree, and I'm hoping this arbitration process is going to help facilitate that. It will be a catalyst for us to help bring to book those who are responsible.
Thank you. DG, in respect of the disciplinary proceedings against the HOD and so on, you say you do not,
Dr. Kinos will come in account for that.
that will come and
Yes.
100%. To that extent, Justice, I think I'm finished.
Are you done, Council?
I'm done.
Thank you. I'd hope to help your way by now, DG, to go and look at our national health care, but it's not going to happen yet. You have at least two counsel. You're going to have one of the evidence leaders is going to pose some questions to you, if he has any, and then there'll be a re-examination. In other words, counsel who led you at the beginning will decide whether he has any re-examination questions, which are normally clarificatory. So that's what is left. We're going to adjourn. It's 1:30. We're resuming at 2:30. Absent anything from council, I'm going to adjourn for an hour. We adjourn.